Ace-3 suited. Yeah, pretty standard open with these stack sizes. The small blind defense, and this is going to be a pretty good board for the opener, me. The small blind isn't defending too many of those low cards, whereas I open a bunch of those. The small blind's range here will be quite Broadway heavy and ace high heavy. So yeah, pretty good board. We get to see bet a decent amount and mostly going for this half pot sizing. Seems like a good option. And we get a fold. King 7, pretty standard open here. Very close to the bottom of our opening range, though, surely. Oh, wrong arrow, folds to the big blind. So in ICM, especially when we have so much pressure on us, given that, again, it's we're playing against one of the chip leaders, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4 very short stacks, then the betting threshold for these monotone or very straighty type of boards goes up quite a bit. We no longer get to range bet these boards. We instead want to play a more polar betting strategy. And a hand like a weak king seems to make a lot of sense as a check back. On the turn, I decided to mix between checking and betting. I think we want to have some strong hands on the getting to the river to defend against big bets. And then also, again, it's a board where we shouldn't be doing too much betting anyway. On the river, we face a block bet, and at this point, King 7 should be the nuts, basically. Our opponent should be using bigger sizes with the vast majority of his value hands. Yeah, he might have some stronger hands in this small sizing, but our hand should definitely go for a value raise here. And our opponent folded. But yeah, calling a king against this sizing is just not going to be the optimal choice. We have to raise this hand. King Queen, pretty standard open. The big blind defense of 11 blinds. And we get this board. And I thought this is a board where we want to have some jams, surely. And a hand like King Queen with the backdoor flush draw seems like the ideal type of jamming hand. We have two overs, we have the backdoor straight flush draw. We fold out a bunch of better hands, some ace-X that our opponent has defended. So I went on and just jammed. Again, this was just my way of thinking. Let's have a look if PioSolver agrees with me. Okay, I used PioSolver HRCM and defending ranges here. It looked like this, seems reasonable. And this is our flop strategy. So yeah, we get to range bet, and we do have, of course, the small sizing, but then also some jams. As for which hand to jam, it appears to be a lot of the broadways with the backdoor flush draw. So we can see King Queen of Spades, King Jack of Spades, Queen Jack of Spades, and then King Queen with a heart, King Jack with a heart, some Ace of Hearts X, and then, of course, a bunch of our vulnerable pairs. So we can see 10-9, 10s, 7s, 6s, Ace-5, then the low Ace-6 with the gut shot. So yeah, basically our vulnerable value range, and then overcards with the backdoor flush draw. When we min c-bet or min bet, this is the response from our opponent, mostly doing jamming, not much calling or raising. As for his jamming range, I think like the toughest hands to find would be these ace-X with a heart. And against the jam, our response looks like this. So yeah, calling pretty much all the high cards with the heart, any pair, any flush draw. Yeah, seems quite reasonable. So yeah, I jammed and our opponent folded. Jack 7, we get a walk. Ace-6 suited, yeah, we have nothing to do with this. Then a bunch of folds. And then we have pocket queens. So very easy call, of course, facing a 10 blind jam from the button. No real decision. Yeah, just unfortunate for him. Super standard, get it in as well. Maybe he can even induce ace-10 suited. So yeah, definitely nothing to be done here. Just an old ugly setup. Well, ugly for him anyway. And then we have this hand, which I thought was quite interesting. I open pocket kings and the button 3 bets. Now, the stack sizes have changed a bit, where I am the second stack size, but I'm almost the same with the chip leader. There is one very short stack and a bunch of middle stacks, so basically, we really don't want to bust here. Pocket Kings is not strong enough to 4-bet here. We pretty much want to continue by calling almost our entire range. Maybe we can 4-bet some aces and some blockers, suited aces as well. Maybe ace king suited. So I call. On the flop, we could potentially raise, but against uncapped ranges and ICM, I think we should continue playing quite passively. Turn. At this point, I think we should pretty much just continue by calling. We even have the king of spades for added protection. The plan is to not really fold many rivers. Our opponent shouldn't be 3-betting too many jacks or tens pre-flop, I don't think. Of course, we still lose to aces, but well, what can you do? Tough life. So I continue by calling, and then we get perhaps the worst river. This is the one where I would just fold to a jam, I think. Our opponent checks back with ace queen. So this was quite a painful situation, I think, in this spot. But I don't think there is any other way to play the hand. This is by far going to be the most optimal and highest EV way in. Just unfortunate run out and unfortunate situation. I think our opponent played his hand well as well, like pretty standard 3-bet, and then of course c-betting flop and barreling turn with the spade, and river a bit too thin for him to jam. Moving on, we have king jack facing an under the gun open, very clear defend. On the flop, we just want to continue by calling. We would raise a bunch of queen x, but king x, especially against under the gun, is a bit too thin. 10 on the turn, check, check. And the river is a 6-bet completes the flush. And here I opted to check, but I think in hindsight I would rather block bet when my kicker is live. Now, of course, one problem is that we're up against under the gun, who is going to have a pretty tight opening range. So it's very likely he just checks back a bunch of stronger hands on the turn. Aces, ace king, maybe even some of his weakest queen x, some flush draws, and so on. So I think I would rather block, but I don't think checking against this position is going to be a mistake. Queen 6. Near the bottom of our opening range, this is a board that we want to be checking a lot against the covering chip leader on the big blind. We cannot continue against the raise, and we want to be checking a lot of our strong hands too. And besides that, we just really want to see a turn with the backdoor straight flush draw that we have. The turn breaks and our opponent checks, and at this point, we are pretty low on our range, and we get to fold out a bunch of better hands, some king highs, ace highs, stronger queen x. So going for this half pot bet appears to be quite a good option. Our opponent folds. And then we have pocket nines, and this one is quite an interesting hand as well. Facing a min raise, our only option here is to call. We are not short enough to get it in. 3-bet folding sucks, 3-bet calling, our hand is not strong enough, so we stick with the remaining option, which is to call. On the flop, facing a small sizing, pretty much just calling. On the turn, we face an overbet, and that's quite interesting. So the 10 isn't necessarily a very good card for the bottom. It hits my defending range quite well. Hands like 9-10, 8-9, even Jack-10, and so on have now improved. Whereas our opponent is still going to have a very, very wide range. So usually in these spots, we don't want to go for too many overbets. But I still think there are some hands that, of course, should choose the overbet sizing. Pocket nines with a heart can't really fold. Having the heart is a pretty nice blocker, and we are drawing, of course, to the 8, and we're blocking 8-9, which is one of the main value hands our opponent will be overbetting. So yeah, we just have to continue on the turn. Not happy, but can't really fold. River 6, and it goes check check, and we win against ace 8 with the ace of hearts. I think the hand selection from our opponent is very, very good. It's just a hand that really makes sense to overbet with. He can bluff hearts. He has the gut shot draw, which also blocks, of course, my nutted range from the big blind. So yeah, I just think it's well played by both of us. Now let's have a look on the solver. First, let's start with the pre-flop sim. So our opponent is supposed to open 60% from the button, which is quite a lot. It's a reasonable range, though, given that he's the big stack and he covers both of us on the blinds. Yeah, 60% opening range. And from the big blind, let's see. So 3 betting to 9 blinds, my range is supposed to look something like this. So kings, ace king, plus, and then some of the low blocker stuff as bluffs. As for jamming, very little jamming from me, mainly ace king, some queens, and these low offsuit ace-6, which, as I mentioned earlier, are just really, really good jams since they don't block raise folding range. Everything else goes into the calling bucket. We can see pocket nines very clearly calling. And one other thing to note is that our defending range here is actually going to be very, very wide. And the reason for that is, first, we are facing a very wide opening range already. But then also our risk premium isn't very high. The SPR is going to be very, very big when we defend, as we can see. And also our opponent isn't that incentivized to play huge pots against us either, since him doubling us up is a pretty big disaster for him. So yeah, because of those reasons, we just get to defend super wide, low risk premium, and very wide opening range. Now let's check the post-flop sim. Of course, we range check, and our opponent gets to pretty much range bet for a small sizing. The bigger sizings aren't really used almost ever. Against the small sizing, our response is very, very interesting. So not only because of how wide we get to value raise, hands like Jack 10 and Jack 9, and so on, but more so because we get to continue ridiculously wide. You can see hands like King 3 suited, Queen 3 suited, Queen 4 suited, 8-5, 8-6, all of those backshot flush draw hands, they just always continue. Even hands like Queen 9 off, King 9 off, Ace 4 off, and so on. I think it can be very easy for someone to be overfolding here. I know I would be. I would certainly be overfolding by a decent margin. But yeah, facing a very small bet against a very wide range means that we can continue very wide ourselves, as we won't be facing too many turn barrels, and therefore we will have decent equity realization. Pocket nines, pure calling, and turn was the 10 of hearts. So yeah, we can see that the overbet sizing isn't really used. For sizings, I gave a small like 25%, half pot, 75%, and then overbet like 120%. So we can see the 75% sizing is the one used the most, with some low amount of half pot and some even lower amount of overbetting. One of the few hands that overbet, though, is those Ace of Hearts 8, Ace of Hearts 9 type of hands. We can see those are just, really good overbet candidates. To have a better look, so yeah, we can see some Ace 8, some Queen 8 with a heart, and of course 9-8 being the main value hand that wants to bet big. Overall, though, this card is really good for the big blind, as I mentioned. Even looking at equities, you can see that the in position only has 44.5% equity, which is, of course, really, really low, given that he has all of the high end of his range. So hands like Ace Jack, King Jack, you can see those are checking a pretty high frequency here. Of course, the lowest Jack X2, but I'm only mentioning the ones that seem to be the most crazy ones. Another thing to remember is that in these spots, we want to be quite careful with the flush draws that we bet. We really don't want to have to be bet folding strong flush draws. which is why we usually want to be checking the middling ones and betting with the stronger ones and the very weak ones. So, for example, you can see these low kings are checking, whereas the combo draws are always betting because they can just bet call. All right, so against the overbet sizing, pocket nines are close but never really folding. We just always continue here. And on the six of spades on the river, he's, of course, this type of ace-high hands just give up. And his main bluffs are going to be from these king 8, queen 8 type of hands, and some of these low 9x, 8x that he was betting on the turn. If we had faced the river jam, then I think pocket nines just need to fold. Yeah, we're going to have a bunch of better hands to call with. One final thing to note is that actual hand strength isn't important here. It's more important to be blocking our opponent's nutted hands. So you can see hands like queen jack, king jack, ace jack fold, whereas jack 9, jack 8 call. Because blocking 9-8 is just very important. Same goes with calling 10-9, 10-8, and this type of hands.